The main thing that I keep coming back to, I could probably refine it down from 3 into 1. It's curiosity. It's getting people really interested and curious in that wellbeing journey. And once people are curious, they're kind of on their own journey. They start to actively want to go out and find out more about, all right, how does my environment impact my wellbeing? Or start learning about sleep and, how much sleep am I going to need at night and what is my routine before I go to bed. But if we can get people becoming curious about their wellbeing,
interesting,
they start this process for themselves.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds, and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
This episode includes a conversation about suicide and about young people taking their lives. This is an incredibly important topic. However, if you feel like this is too much to listen to right now, or you'd like to listen with someone, please come back to this episode when you feel ready. The Double D's podcast is not a licensed mental health service, and it's not a substitute for professional mental health advice, treatment, or assessment. The advice given in this episode is general in nature, but if you are struggling, please see a health professional or call Lifeline. Their phone number in Australia is 131144. Today, our guest is Lockie O'Donoghue. Lockie is a local WA lad, having graduated from Corrine Senior High School in 2015. And he writes that he's a self-confessed shithead at school. We'll maybe get a few stories out of that. But more importantly and more poignantly, Lockie lost 2 of his best mates to suicide in 2017, along with some family members. And his dad had his first bipolar mania episode that same year. 20 Talk formed over the next few years and was established with his partner Lachlan until 2020, when they became an established not-for-profit and then a charity the following year. 20 Talk was established to bridge the gap between current mental health education and the youth who were not able to easily connect or resonate with the material. It has grown to one of WA's most well-known charities in the last few years, doubling and even tripling revenue and impact year on year since its inception. 20 Talk achieves its vision through media, training and events. And we are so looking forward to this interview with Lockie, one of its founders. Hi, Lockie. Great to see you again and see you in your 20 Talk merch.
Liz, thanks for having me on.
Not at all. So, Lockie, I first met Lachlan, actually, your business partner. Do you call him your business partner?
Business
partner in crime.
Co-founder. I spend more time with him than I do my fiancée, so definitely partner.
Oh, congratulations. I didn't know you were engaged.
Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah. That's exciting.
Very exciting.
Yes, and you still got your dog Luna?
Still got the dog Luna. Yeah, that's our first child.
Very good, very good. So I first met Lachlan, your co-founder, at Curtin Ignition Program. And I remember when I first met him because, we were just chatting away. I was in one of these little clinics and I was saying, why are you here and what are you about? And I was really struck straight away with how important the work is that you do. So what I'd love to start with is, how did this all come about?
Sure. How long have we got? And I'll probably preface this by saying that Lachlan and I both have a kind of different story for how 20 Talk came about for us. So I'll just be giving my kind of version of events. But Lachlan and myself knew each other both through high school. So I graduated in 2015. But from years 8 to 10, we were really good friends, and then we both moved into different friendship groups, but we were still good mates. And then we obviously graduated high school 2015, and then in 2017, we unfortunately lost a really close friend of ours to suicide, and Lachlan was a good friend of his as well. And during that mourning process, it really did bring all of the kind of disconnected friends all back together. And fortunately for me and for a lot of our friendship group, my old man was over in Rottnest that week that we found out about the news. So, I mean, Dad might not have known this, but we just decided that my house would just be kind of mission control and everyone could just come there to mourn together. And for about 3 or 4 days, there was just like an eternal bonfire. Guys and girls were just sleeping wherever they could kind of find a spot. But it was more so just somewhere that we could be together to connect and just try and feel whatever we're feeling as a group. And yeah, Leighton was there for those few days, and there was one particular night where Leighton was going to walk home. It was about a 7K walk back to his house. I remember speaking to him and saying, do you want someone to give you a lift? And he had this kind of look in his eyes, and he really wanted to just walk home and think and just kind of stew over things. And again, this is Leighton's story, but I think what happened to him on that walk home is he had a really strong kind of experience and a message to him that he had to start something, had to do something in mental health. So yeah, fast forward a few months on from there, we got the really tragic news that another one of our friends had taken his life as well, someone that was over at my house for that mourning process. And that really kind of crystallized in a lot of our friendship that something really wasn't right with the current landscape around wellbeing. And yeah, not long after that, I got a Facebook message off Lachlan saying, mate, I want to do this thing for mental health. I don't know really what it is, but are you in, essentially? And I said, 100%, I'm in, let's do it. So kind of late 2017, early 2018, Leighton, myself and 3 others met at his house just with this idea to try and help our immediate friends. We didn't really know what that looked like. But when we got really honest with each other and asked, we found out that what was available to us as young guys at that stage, young 20-year-olds, in terms of wellbeing, safety and support and education, it just wasn't relatable and it wasn't engageable. There were organisations out there, but for one reason or another, we didn't feel like we wanted to reach out to them. And if we felt that way, we recognised that a lot of our friends might feel that way as well, and a lot of the kind of wider community might feel like that. So that's when we just decided that we weren't just going to sit there and accept that, and we wanted to try and fix that. So yeah, born was the idea of 20 Talk and creating a platform where wellbeing is relatable and engageable for young people. We went through a lot of different phases from, I think at one stage we were trying to run about 16 programs. I wouldn't even call them programs. They were just ideas that we were experimenting with. At one stage we had about 20 volunteers. So for 2 guys running an event with 20 volunteers and 16 programs, all just in our spare time whilst we were working full time, you can imagine that we weren't using our time efficiently, and a lot of these things were kind of done with 5-10% of our energy. So over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, we started refining what we do, and since about 2021, when we got our not-for-profit and charity registration, we've really just refined what we do to training, media and events. So we do a lot of mental health and wellbeing training in all the universities around WA, and have recently integrated into the TAFE space as well. We do a lot in the media space, not just with social media, but moving into kind of short and long form documentaries now as well. And then, yeah, just as of this year, we've kicked off our event space, and that's the 20 Hours for 20 Talk program that Di will be taking part in soon.
Yeah, I have signed up for 20 Hours for 20 Talk. I've got lots of motivators for doing it. One is I know you guys, and I think the thing for me, it's really obvious that 20 Talk is about connection and about human connection. And I followed you a little bit and like to keep in touch vaguely, but there's something that you're doing and have done and who you are that connects people, and that's really obvious, you know. And, we can maybe talk about a little bit more about how you've, the things that you've seen really work. But can I take you back a little bit, Lockie, to kind of that starting point, like noticing what was not relevant, what was not working, not maybe knowing at that time what could work or what would be better or different, but you had a sense that there's something really not working. I mean, what was happening amongst your friends at the time that told you that? Because obviously you had 2 incredibly tragic events, which in of themselves are enough to tell anybody things are not maybe right. But, what were your friends saying? What were they saying about what was on offer that just wasn't relevant?
Yeah, I think at the time it was obviously all of our thinking was was kind of influenced by losing our mates. So it was very front of mind. But even before then, finishing school, going through years 11 and 12, we would have presentations at school, whether it's if we go to the assembly area and someone comes in to speak about mental health, it might be a Lifeline representative, or it might be, actually in class, the teachers really touching on it, maybe 5 minutes or so. But there was just this feeling of that it was just not enough. Like, we knew that there were things out there. We knew that there was resources available if we, went digging for them, and we kind of knew where to go if we really wanted to. But what we kept on coming back to is that we didn't want to engage with these organisations. They weren't speaking in a language that we understood. They didn't look like us. There wasn't really any draw. It wasn't attractive to us at all. And that's where we saw the big problem, that you've got this incredible wealth of knowledge and education and support there, but no one's opening the door and actually accessing it. And we just thought that if we've come across this problem, it's not right of us to recognise that and then just move on. I think I can speak for Lachlan here and say one of his really core values is justice. And I think he saw it as a bit of an injustice that all these young people were growing up and, they might have access in a sense to resources, but they weren't accessing it. And there's some reason.
So we've got this gap between, like, we know all the things that work, but if people aren't accessing it, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
Lockie, when you lost your friends, had there been things that had been worrying you about these friends prior when you looked back on it, or was it something completely unexpected?
Both of them are very different. Our first friend that we lost is I hate to say it, but the stereotypical case of, last person you would expect, never would have thought that he was in a dark place at all, always life of the party type of personality. In hindsight and looking back, you can always look at different scenarios and go, all right, maybe that was a sign, maybe that was a sign. But for most of us in that moment, we would have had no idea. Our second friend was a little bit different in that during the mourning process of the first friend, he was very vocal with saying that Kai, our first friend that had passed away, he was his support rock. He was the person that he went to speak to, and being very verbal about, like, yeah, this is going to be tough without him. So it was very hard to come to terms with our second friend passing, knowing that the writing wasn't on the wall, but he had verbally said that, yeah, this is going to be tough. And obviously, everyone knows that it's not our fault and that we couldn't have done anything, but it is something that you do look back with hindsight and go, far out, it was at least more obvious than the first person.
And based on everything you've learnt and being in this organisation for these years now and all the programs, because I know you run a lot of the programs, what would be some tips for people? I mean, if they are worried about a friend or a mate, what would you recommend? All
of the current literature says that if you are worried, ask the person, ask them directly. Don't kind of sweep it under the carpet and, think that it might not be an issue or someone else will ask the question. If you're worried, just, have that conversation with the person. Yeah, that would definitely be, my input.
How would you sort of suggest broaching that subject? Because it might not be an easy thing for people to actually ask, because especially if you're not used to having
in all of our mental health first aid training sessions that we've done, there's a section in there where it talks about having the suicidal conversation. And when we delivered it, we added in an extra bit from a kind of 20 talk lens that we recognise that just being told to ask that question is a little bit confronting and sometimes a little bit abrupt. So I'm trying to scan the back of my brain now for exactly what the process was. But essentially what we decided is that, yes, it could be a little bit abrupt to ask that question. So use a kind of process where you say, look, this is a really hard thing for me to bring up right now, and I'm actually feeling a bit awkward asking you it, but I'm asking you because I care and I've seen some signs or I've heard some things, and I genuinely want to know if you're all right, and then going on to ask the question. So that way it kind of softens it a little bit, makes it a bit more personable. Yeah. So, that would be my advice, just being really open and honest with the person. And, I mean, hey, if you get upset asking that question, then that's fine. It just shows that you care. But I think at the end of the day, if you're worried about someone, it is really important to ask. And it can be a really liberating thing for the person as well, because suicide is still this really taboo subject. The person might not have spoken to anyone in the world about this.
Yeah.
So to have someone step into that space with you can be a really big, sign of support.
And what if they don't feel comfortable saying anything and they say, oh yeah, no, I'm fine. But you kind of have that feeling that they're not?
Yeah.
Sort of broach it again a bit later on, or?
Yeah, you can come back to it. I think my advice in the past has been if the person says yes, the first thing I would say is, really thank them and let them know that you really appreciate the fact that they've been honest with you, and then go on to figuring out, all right, what can we get in place? How urgent is the need for care, and what can we kind of set up to support this person? If they say no and you sense that they're just saying no to you and it might be a yes, maybe just try and reassure them, or just confirm for yourself that they've got someone to speak to. And that might sound like, I completely understand if you don't want to speak to me about this, but do you have someone that you can speak to, whether it's a family member or a friend? Because there are a lot of barriers, whether they're cultural but there's a lot of barriers for why people might not admit that or be honest. So just trying to make sure that they've got someone in their network to speak to about it.
And I think I've refreshed my mental health first aid training recently, and, one of the things I think I remember as well is that often people will feel unable to ask because they're scared of the response. Like, what if someone does say yes, and then I don't feel equipped for that? But I think I've got a lot better at practicing it myself, and I've asked many people now especially in the last probably 4 years. A friend of mine in her 50s took her life, and I saw her very recently, before she did, and we've all got those conversations in our head that we wish we'd had, and I have just lent into them more easily, I think, and I've learned, my nervous system has learned it's okay to go there, and I think it's like anything we fear often, that it's the thought of it is actually worse than the acting on it. Now, would that have saved that person's, would it have made a difference? I'll never know. But I think it is a practice, and I wonder if you'd agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. That response from the body when you are kind of getting nervous and your palms might be getting clammy, all of these things are just symbols from our body to show that we care about this thing, and it means a lot to us. And I think in today's day and age, we need to be stepping more into accepting these feelings when they come up instead of just putting them to the side. You've heard people talk about this in the sense of, maybe toxic masculinity, when someone feels something and then they kind of push it aside because they're too tough. But it can be applied to so many different scenarios. And if we're talking about, having this suicidal conversation with someone, we get all these feelings, and just being mindful not to let those feelings inhibit you from actually doing what's important.
And Lockie, I've got kids your age, and that's part of another reason why I really, love supporting you in any way I can. But what is it that you're finding with the social media side of things that you do and the media campaigns that you do? What's connecting with people your age in a way that other things haven't?
It's a funny one to answer here because, like I said off air, Lachlan manages, the other co-founder, he manages the media and I manage the training. And the reason why I kind of fell into the training space is because, my view on social media is pretty negative. So maybe we can get into that in a little bit. But from a 20 Talk perspective, I think what really relates to people is that we're not a clinical charity. We're not an organisation that has to follow a lot of the kind of government rules. We like to go across the grain, and we like to speak about things that maybe some other organisations wouldn't want to speak about. Also, because we're still growing and we're flexible, we can have the opportunity to go into different areas that just come up. And if we think that it's interesting and needs to be spoken about, then we can speak about it. And I think we've got a really good connection with the community. And when we kind of do a call out for people from a certain demographic or people experiencing a certain struggle, I think there's a respect there from that community to be able to trust us with their story.
I've watched quite a few of your videos where you basically have someone sharing their story about, all their struggles. And is that the kind of thing that you are speaking about that people can relate to? And things that other organisations wouldn't be approaching.
Yeah, it's that lived experience, and for the individual sharing, it's a really liberating and freeing process to own that story and to share it. And also for other people in the community who are watching this or listening to this, it's a real moment when they go, all right, I'm not the only person feeling this. Here's this person that I'm looking at this screen that is feeling exactly what I've been feeling. And then you see in the comments that there's, hundreds of people that are feeling the same way as well. So you start to, that aspect of isolation starts to kind of fade away a little bit.
This episode is sponsored by the Speakers Institute Premier Boot Camp. So the Speakers Institute teaches and coaches people into how to speak in public. And in early December 2024, I attended a 3-day Premier Boot Camp myself, and it was a completely life-changing experience. I went along to learn how to share my story, part of my personal story, in a better way and in a way that I wouldn't become as emotional when I was telling it. And so I started off in a very bad way, very emotional, but with all the skills, the humour, the care and compassion of the coaches and of the other participants, by the end of day 3, I was able to deliver a 6-minute presentation on part 1 of my personal story. So I was very proud of that, and I found it a life-changing experience. So if you want to read a little bit more about my own experience in the Speakers Institute Premier Boot Camp, you can do that, and you can sign up as well if you're interested. It's a 3-day boot camp, and they have them throughout the year in various locations. So go to donnasbalconyviews.com.au/public speaking. So that's donnasbalconyviews.com.au/public speaking, and you can transform your public speaking like I did. Because that was one of my next questions. Is, we've spoken about what do you do with a friend, is you think you're worried about a friend, but what would you recommend if you are the person who's feeling like, who is feeling suicidal or just feels like they can't cope with life? What would you recommend for them?
I think we all know the crisis lines, all of the kind of standard ones. If things like Lifeline and Beyond Blue are applicable to you, and in no way I want this to sound like Lifeline aren't doing amazing work, because they're an incredible service, and so is Beyond Blue, so is Black Dog Institute. All of these services are incredible. Where 20 Talk kind of comes into it is that if people aren't using those services, we wanted to provide something for them. Mm-hmm. But for the people that are feeling, be it suicidal or just worried about their mental health and the kind of direction that they're going, look into these different online services or call up services and see if anything resonates with you. The one I always try and give some airtime to is MERL, Mental Health Emergency Response Line. And they're an incredible organisation where you can call up, it might be that you've got an assessment at uni and you're just feeling a little bit anxious. You can call up for advice about that, or you can, even at the other end of the line, if you are suicidal and needing some immediate help, some immediate crisis care, you can call up and ask and talk to them about that. And I just think that they're an incredible resource for people in WA, and it's just not, people aren't aware of it.
No, I wasn't either, and it's really great. We can share that in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely.
And Lockie, I guess, what I really see and hear with what you're trying to, support with 20 Talk is much more around the building a community and normalising all the different myriads of how we might express mental health in all its, in all its forms, but also for your demographic, I'm assuming the 20 comes from the age of 20s, in your 20s, am I right? Yeah, I haven't really asked you about that before, but I'm assuming it is.
Yeah.
But it has a very target audience.
Yeah.
And what about that really preventative stuff? What are you noticing that really supports people way before they get anywhere near suicide?
Yes, that target demographic, it initially was 18 to 30. We've kind of extended to 16 to 30 now, as we're starting to do a bit more work in schools. But that age demographic came out of the fact that when we lost our mates, we were 2 years out of school. I think that stage when people are leaving school, they're getting into university or they're getting into full-time jobs, they're probably moving out of home, they're having their first, real experiences as a independent adult. It's a lot to deal with. And whilst we might have some support during the school process, or at least in the family dynamic when we're at home in that process, once we move out, a lot of those support mechanisms kind of break down and we are just living, by ourselves in this big, scary world. So that's why we wanted to pitch our education and all of what we do towards that 18 to 30-year-olds, because it is such a scary time with so much potential for good, but there is a lot of potential for struggle as well. So that's why we aim within that kind of age demographic. Had a blank. What was your next question?
Oh, well, it was like these more preventative things. So, I mean, part of what you're also speaking to is that you spoke to earlier was, on one hand, we know social media is not great for our mental health. Media is one of your main mechanisms that people do connect. So we've got this kind of paradox, but I'm sure it's a healthy tension between, within the organisation. Yeah. But how does that really support the preventative side? Yeah.
Yeah, it's that old saying of if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
Our idea with the media side was that there's so many horrible things that come out of social media, but we wanted to try and pitch 20 Talk as a light in the dark on social media.
Okay.
In terms of that prevention piece, there's definitely a wellbeing momentum at the moment. From, pretty much, I would say 14 onwards, you're starting to see this real change in how people perceive wellbeing. And I use the example of, 10 years ago, you probably would have never seen a guy in a Pilates class or a yoga class. But now, yoga classes are full of guys and no one's now scared to show that they're actively working on their well-being. It's more so seen as a badge of honour that you're doing things to further and empower your well-being. So whether you're doing some additional learning through our training course, say, or if you're going to uni and you're doing an elective, in psychology, or there's this real push for people to start learning about their well-being and take this proactive approach. So 20 Talk really wants to enhance that. So a lot of our work goes towards the 80% of people who identify as well and trying to empower them with their well-being. So understanding, what are the influences on our well-being? How can we maximize the benefits from, taking a proactive approach? That's not to say that it doesn't help people that are struggling, but our focus is really on, let's look at the people that are doing okay right now and build them even stronger to prevent them from going backwards.
Yeah, and so what are 2 or 3 things that you see as making key differences for this demographic? What's really working to prevent?
The main thing that I keep coming back to, I could probably refine it down from 3 into 1. It's curiosity. It's getting people really interested and curious in that wellbeing journey. And once people are curious, they're kind of on their own journey. They start to actively want to go out and find out more about, all right, how does my environment impact my well-being? Or start learning about sleep and, how much sleep am I going to need at night and what is my routine before I go to bed? But if we can get people becoming curious about their well-being,
interesting,
they start this process for themselves and it then becomes this kind of self-powered journey to maximising their well-being, or at least being a very fundamentally confident person with your own well-being.
That's so interesting. I've never heard it sort of put like that, but it's like you're catalysing their curiosity and then there's something about the safety and the interest of that they can go on that journey themselves with or without you, but maybe also dipping in and out of some of the things that you offer.
Yeah, for sure. It's another saying's coming into my head. It's teach a man to fish. You know the one I'm talking about. I can't remember the whole thing, but same thing.
Feed a man a fish or teach a man to fish.
We can provide these people services and we can provide these people kind of reactive approaches, or we can actually give them the tools and say, look, guys, this is what we can do. This is where you can be if you take a really, proactive approach to your well-being and wanting to kind of get on top of it and learn more and become, like I said, like a really fundamentally confident person with your well-being.
I really like that approach because everyone's unique and different. And when I listened to one of your previous interviews, Lockie, you talked about how, for example, physical exercise is so important to you and swimming.
Yeah.
And so that's your thing, and I know that's important for a lot of people, including me as well. But I guess other people have other things that really help them, like maybe connecting with friends or...
Yeah, it could be the social side. It could be just connecting back to your family. It could be connecting back to your culture. It could be just, trying some new intellectual hobbies. So for me this year I've started learning piano just because I wanted something that...
Is that to play to your wife on your wedding night?
Now that you've said that, she'll probably catch on to it.
Soz.
So thanks for that. No, but for me, there's always been, like you said, that passion with sports and endurance sports, and I feel like that's always given me something to focus on outside of work. I'll speak to this later, but that's a massive part of my kind of resilience, or built into my resilience, is having something else outside of what I do for work. But on a similar note, that's why I wanted to start learning the piano, because it gives me something else to give my mind to, something else to kind of commit to. But there's so many different things. It could be your studies. It could be something at work. It could be something as simple as just, the garden at the back of your house. But having these different things that you can kind of rely on or lean on to support you, I think is really important.
So Lockie, that's making me think that if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you could just spend a few minutes after listening to really think about things that in your own life that help your well-being. And even if you've got a list of them, and then when you're not feeling so great, you can go to that list.
Yeah. I definitely look at it as as a way to support myself. I kind of see myself on the top, and then I've got these kind of supporting arms that come out from me. And one might be, my relationship with my partner. One might be my relationship with my friends. Another might be physical exercise. The other might be piano. The other might be sleeping well. And the more kind of supporting arms that you have, when something does go downhill, say it's a relationship issue, you've got all these other supporting arms that hold you and support you. So I think, really thinking about what you want those supporting arms to be is definitely a good exercise.
Yeah. So how would you go about doing that exercise?
Well, you could definitely come along to a 20-talk mental health maintenance workshop, because essentially what we do in those workshops...
Are we not too old for that?
Absolutely not. What we do in these workshops is go through the 12 dimensions of wellness and look at examples from each of those 12 dimensions and help you find what are some examples in your life. And then it becomes the support mechanism for you, and you've got 12 supporting arms. And some of those might be bigger than others. Some of them might have a bigger impact on your life than others. But just having that kind of holistic approach, a lot of the feedback that we get is that, I never realised that there were so many things that influenced my well-being. Well, I knew.
What would be, 3 or 4 of the dimensions?
So in the physical dimension, we've got sleep, diet, exercise, and breathing. I think breathing is a very underestimated one.
Absolutely.
But then there's other things like your intellectual wellness, your financial wellness, relationships, environmental, spiritual, emotional, and another one that we talk about is self-control. So the amount of discipline that you have over yourself, whether it's how long are you spending on your phone each day, whether it's how many times do you press snooze on your alarm when it goes off. It's that relationship with that voice in your head that, it's been a long day and you get home and you told yourself that you were going to go to the gym. It's that relationship with that voice in your head that's going, nah, we can just do it tomorrow.
That was me last night.
And that's fine if you're being supported by some of the aspects in the other, 11 dimensions.
Is that list of dimensions available
Absolutely.
on your website?
Maybe not on the website, but I'll definitely send you something that you can put in the show notes for it.
Yeah, because if people aren't able to go to your workshops, just hearing about these dimensions, I think would be very helpful for people to think through.
I'll send across a kind of wheel of life activity where you can just rate yourself 0 to 10 in each of these dimensions. And once you do, you create this kind of shape on the chart, which allows you to visually see, all right, where am I doing really well and where are the areas that I could probably do some additional work in.
And do you find that there's a couple that tend to be gaps for more people than others?
Yeah.
Yep.
I would say self-control and the discipline is one that most people don't rate themselves very high in, and the majority of those people, it's to do with their phone use. I would say that breathing and spirituality are the next two, because I think for a lot of people, they've never stepped into that space of breathing and breathing exercises. So there still is people might think it's a bit taboo still, but stepping into that space has been just so helpful for me. I can't even start to describe the impact that just having an awareness of conscious breath has had on my life. And then similarly for spirituality, a lot of people either have never thought about spirituality or have kind of connected when they were younger and then stepped back a little bit. And there's a real misconception around spirituality that it's exclusively tied to religion. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case. For a lot of people, their religion is their spirituality. But if you're not religious, it doesn't mean that you can't be spiritual. So for a lot of people, their spirituality could just be nature and just spending time in nature or at the beach. So having that awareness and kind of reconnecting into those spaces.
And I think we're kind of just starting to understand through some of the breathwork practitioners the importance of the breath. And I was listening to another podcast this morning where Jefferson Fisher, who talks about communication, was saying he talks about now the first word that you should say is actually your breath. So how you breathe before you even open your mouth. First thing you should say is breathe or a version of that.
Yeah.
And I love that because I think, you know, as we get more sophisticated in our understanding of how the breath really supports us, we'll look back and go, how did we not know this, you know?
Well, funnily enough, the sponsor of this podcast, which is the Premier Speakers Institute Premier Boot Camp, I attended that last year and I had this massive panic attack. I was a complete wreck. And one of the coaches came and she's actually an expert on breathing. She's an ex-Olympic swimmer and she just got me to totally calm down through focusing on my breathing. So it was a really, really powerful example of breathing. So
even within the breathing dimension, I think there is a misconception that we can only use breathing to get ourselves out of a bad situation, like a panic attack or an anxiety attack. So I feel like there's this other part of breathing where even if you're in a place of calm or if you're about to start journaling, or you can use breathing to kind of enhance that and feel more into it.
I love that.
I often do a breathing practice before I journal just to be able to drop myself into a really nice space of being calm. So yeah, just highlighting that.
I think that's a great point because I think we often, and it's the same with mental health, I think often we've still got a very negative connotation, which then means that we're just trying to right something that seems wrong rather than this is what it means to be a human being and how do we just support a healthy life.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned, Lockie, about the discipline and the device in particular, that's partly one of the real revelationary things about your event, the 20 hours, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to just run through the kind of rules of the 20 hours, how it works? And
yeah, for any listeners that aren't aware of what 20 hours for 20 Talk is, it's a fundraising challenge that we've come up with. We've trialled it last year but are just rolling it out as a full-scale event this year. The idea is to completely disconnect from society and technology and spend 20 hours just with yourself, just with your thoughts in a really safe environment where you're comfortable and you can actually start to address some of these things that we too often put in that cardboard box and throw in the closet because we've got so much going on in our lives. It's easy to not address those. So it's about confronting those in a safe way and having space outside of this hectic schedule that we all have just to sit with ourselves and just to be and just to reflect.
So you have a 2 metre by 2 metre.
You've got a 2 by 2 metre square.
Yep.
You're allowed.
Come on, remind me what I'm facing in 2 weeks' time.
So you're allowed a swag, a chair, a journal and a pen. You're allowed to bring your food as well, and you've obviously got access to toilets and water. But apart from that, from 4 o'clock in the morning until midnight that night, there's just complete silence. We will host a few kind of activations throughout the day, whether it be a breathing activity or a yoga session. I won't give too much away, but there's a few different activities that we run. But it's all just about, creating an environment where people are allowed to just kind of give in to themselves and just sit with themselves. Because even if you go out to something like yoga, it might be an hour session, but you probably know that, all right, after this hour session, I've got to run and get the kids from soccer practice, or I've got to get home and do this uni assignment. So although you're finding peace and mindfulness in that hour, you've still got somewhere to be, but that's not the case with 20 hours. You're there for a long time. And for listeners, if you think about, maybe when you got up this morning and how many hours it's been until you're listening to this podcast, it might be 3, 4. If it's the end of the day, it's probably been 12 or 16 hours just think about everything that you've done today and replace it with just sitting in a square and just thinking. And for so many people that we just never get that chance.
I've done this other challenge twice now where you go to an art gallery and you pick one painting and you have to sit and look at just that painting for 3 hours straight.
Wow.
And, you're also not allowed your phone. You can have a notebook. And I found the first 10 minutes was horrendous. It was like, we've only been here for 10 minutes. But after about an hour, it's incredible because you start really noticing stuff in the painting and you're just focusing on one thing, and it makes you realise so rarely in life are you only focusing on one thing and without your mind racing around and thinking about everything else you've got to do. And it was such a powerful experience. And how do people cope with not having their devices and at the beginning of the day versus the end?
Yeah, putting them away, there's probably mixed feelings of A, get this thing away from me, and B, I don't know, a bit of trepidation with giving it in. But 100% of the time, at the end of the event, when we put everyone's phones out and they're allowed to come and get them, some people have a kind of physical reaction and they stand there looking at their phone, and you can see that there's a change in how they perceive their phone. There's a change in that connection that they have with their phone. Some people turn it on straight away. But for a lot of people, they go, I don't need this. I'm going to drive home tonight without my phone. I'm probably going to keep it off tonight. And there's that really slow integration back into their phone. And I think it's just a realization that we put so much focus onto these things, and spending 20 hours without it, you come to realize that, all right, this is who I am as a person. This is what I really feel like when I haven't been distracted by this phone. I haven't been influenced by this phone. So when they come back and get it, there is a very distinct change in how what their connection is with the phone.
I read somewhere, or I listened to your podcast where you said that once you're in a park and you saw 3 generations of people in the park all on their phones while they were walking in this beautiful park, and that had quite a big impact on you as far as reducing your phone use as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I just was at the park and I was sitting on my phone scrolling through Instagram, and I just thought, why am I doing this? I'm at the park with my beautiful dog, lift my head up and look around. And I looked around and saw, a younger guy than me walking around with his dog. He was on his phone, and then a mother walked past me and she had a pram, and in the pram it had an iPad attachment, and the baby was watching something on the iPad. And it was a really confronting moment for me where I just saw, 3 generations of people all just attached to these devices. And I just started thinking about what is the trajectory that we are on as a society with these things, and what is this kind of thing that we've been sold as connection. And it really scared me, and that's kind of what catalyzed me an interest in anthropology and what happens to societies when a new technology or a new thing is implemented and how it changes the course of history. And I just feel that we're on a scary trajectory at the moment, and not sure if it can change, but I at least want to put some of my effort into at least making people aware of the effects. Yeah,
and I think just even listening to what you're saying, if everyone can just cut back a little bit, I know I need to do that as well. So
I've gotten rid of social media off my phone, and I'd gone through all of the attempts at getting rid of it on the 1st of January or getting rid of it on my birthday, trying to use these special dates to mark when I've stopped using it. And it never worked. But there was one day where I was in Indonesia and we were on a little cruise going around some islands, and I was on my phone scrolling through Instagram, and I looked up and I saw these beautiful islands and this beautiful scenery around me. And that was for me when I just went, what am I doing? And I deleted it then and there and haven't been back on it since. And it's incredible. There might have been a few days where I was like, I kind of still have those urges, but there's no urges anymore.
Wow.
And even the thought of being on Instagram, it seems like such a waste of time, such a waste of time. And for friends of mine, whenever we catch up, I might have just gone for a run and then I've done some work and rah. But people will always ask me, all right, how are you getting so much stuff done? And I always just relate it back to the fact that I'm not spending 5 hours a day on my phone. And that's what the current stats are between, I think, 15 and 29-year-olds, average of 5.5 hours a day spent on their phone.
Well, Lockie, I'm actually really looking forward to it for some of the reasons you said, which is actually the really legitimate excuse not to have it. Someone will take it away from me and I'm actually going to be really glad to hand it over.
Yeah.
And I'm not in my 20s.
Lockie, was there any final things that you wanted to share today?
Not really. I think the only thing I had down about resilience was just I feel like I treat my resilience like we spoke about, setting up those support arms for you. I look at that as like, all right, what can I do outside of me to help? But inside, having a really kind of eudaimonic approach to adversity in life and just having a really good confidence in yourself that you can handle whatever's going to come up.
And how do you develop that?
Well, for me, it's been through trial and error and being through adversity.
Yeah.
I would like to think that that's not the only way that people can develop these skills, but I think going into a scenario completely believing that I can handle this and I can get through it in a calm manner and I can regulate emotions, that provides a whole lot of power and a whole lot of resilience for you moving forward. So I think just having that belief is important.
And also, if you start doing harder things in your everyday life, I think, you even say, for example, you go for a run, you've never run, you get through it.
Yeah.
Then I think that also improves your confidence that you can get through other difficult things.
And life will throw things at you. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
I think everyone listening to this podcast will have had something in their life that has really tested them, but they've gotten through. And from that, you can build resilience in yourself and build the belief that you can get through.
And then if you do go through a really difficult time, you can think back to when you got through something before and know that you can do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Lockie, we're going to share all about 20 Talk, obviously, in the show notes, and I'm really, really genuinely looking forward to the challenge, although I know it will be a tough one as well. What's your hope for 20 Talk? Like, what's the dream for where 20 Talk will take?
Yeah, well, our vision is to be the most relatable mental health charity of the 21st century. For me personally, my goal with 20 Talk is just to get as many people possible curious about their mental health. I believe that once they're curious, they'll be on the right path. Just to get people curious, get them honestly interested in, all right, how good can I make my well-being?
Fantastic.
Yeah. And look, we'll share for our listeners as well who want to contribute. It doesn't have to be to the 20 hours challenge, but if they want to make a donation, we'll share how they can do that. And we're going to follow you with lots of curiosity going forward.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much
Likewise.
for coming in and chatting to us today.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you've loved today's episode. We always enjoy bringing these to you. We'd love to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that we can do that is to ask you to like us, to follow us, to give us a review, but also just to share it with your friends and family.